Good evening. Welcome to Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector podcast. I am your host, Tabatha L. Tonight, I will outline critical NEC requirements for new or remodeled kitchens. In this episode, I will explore and go over why kitchen inspections fail. I will give you corrective actions required to pass the electrical inspection. Also, at the end of this episode, I will answer questions from the electrical industry, homeowners, and business owners. Your electrical power system is essential to your everyday living. It powers everything from lights, receptacles are the outlet plugs used to charge your cell phones, heating and cooling, and your appliances in your home. We often take electricity safety for granted by wasting unused electrical power. Unfortunately, some homeowners are not familiar with electrical code requirements. Some electrical inspections are vital for your electrical construction projects. Electrical inspections will identify potential hazards, ensuring that the electrical safety of your property. An electrical inspection is not only for your family or your employees, but also for anyone that visits your home or frequents your business. Also gives you a peace of mind knowing that your electrical system has been evaluated and adheres to safety standards of the National Electrical Code. In my 18th episode, I provided information on when an electrical permit will be required. If you alter or build a new structure that requires electricity, you must hire a licensed electrical contractor. The licensed electrical contractor will be responsible for all electrical installation, including securing a permit, scheduling inspections, purchasing electrical equipment, electrical product listing and labeling requirements, engineering questions, NEC requirements, and they're responsible for the electrical ordinance 1102. You're responsible to know that. So now I want to take you step by step on the inspection process, because I often get asked questions when I do these inspections. The home inspection process for a rough cover. So if you're going to do a kitchen, just depending on how large the kitchen is, depends on how many inspections you're going to have. I'll keep it brief. We're just going to have two for this training purposes. You're going to have a rough cover. A rough cover inspection is the walls are being roughed in, the ceilings are being roughed in. The electrical contractor will schedule a rough cover inspection before the drywall can be installed. An electrical inspection will be required for walls and ceilings. These inspections entail visually inspecting the electrical boxes, the cable assemblies, conductors, and conduits. Anything that was electrically installed will be inspected. When the inspection, the walls and the ceilings are ready to be closed, an inspector must approve all of the electrical equipment and wiring methods before you can actually install the installation or install the drywall. I would just like to take a brief moment to explain to the homeowners when an inspector comes. The procedures. I will arrive on the job site. I will have a badge to identify myself, and I also will have a company logo. Sometimes the contractor will be on the job site if the job site is large enough. If it's a large enough project, I can meet the contractor on that job site. or sometimes the homeowner will be on the job site because it's just the kitchen being renovated, and sometimes they're able to stay in the home. So when I arrive and the homeowner comes to the door and I introduce myself, now they want to know, what do I need to look at? I'm there for the electrical inspection. I'm there to look at the electrical installation that was installed by the electrical contractor. The contractors, if you are able to get in contact with your homeowners, that's a service that I will greatly appreciate if you will allow them to know that I'm coming, because that helps me out a lot, because I don't have to explain why I'm there, because most of the time when they know I'm coming, it goes really smoothly and I'm able to get the inspection done. Once I'm in there and they take me to that location, I will look around. I look for the minimal requirements of the National Electrical Code. And here are a few frequently National Electrical Code violations commonly found when I'm performing kitchen inspections. First off, start with the countertop receptacles. You must have in a kitchen a minimum of two 120-volt, 20-amp branch circuits serving the small appliances, 12 OG conductor. That's a problem that I have on my inspections. If it's a 20-amp circuit, that's the minimum. That's what's required for kitchen small branch circuit appliances. You cannot run a 14-gauge conductor on a 20-amp circuit. That's a problem. Also, let's go right to it. The dining room, while I'm there in the kitchen. So the dining room, if you're going to remodel that also has to be in a 20, it has to be 12 gauge on a 20-amp circuit. I get that question asked a lot. Why? If it's a dining room and the dining room function is for a family to sit and have dinner, and if you have a buffet style setting where you're serving food, you may have warmers. Most of the homes that I do, they're very large kitchens. So they have butler's pantries, they have serving areas, they have the dining room. So the dining room is meant to be a gathering area where you're going to serve food and plug those warmers in. So that's the reason why you need a 20-amp circuit for the dining room, and it's in the code book. The receptacles on the kitchen countertop, all kitchen countertop receptacles must be GFCI protected. That's on the final. I'll pick that up. The receptacles, the dishwasher and the garbage disposal receptacles must be GFCI protected. Article 210A7. Within 6 feet from the top of the inside sink bowl. The dishwasher cannot be hardwired. Attachment plug required. Article 422.16B1 and B2. Flexible cords. The GFCI receptacle that's located under the sink must be readily accessible. And the garbage disposal cannot obstruct or block the GFCI receptacle. It has to be readily accessible without removing any part of building structure. That garbage disposal is a part of building structure. It's a part of the sink. So make sure you know how large the garbage disposal is, because that mostly is the problem. The garbage disposal is not on site when you're roughing in that receptacle under the kitchen counter, the sink. It's not there. when you rough it in, you don't know. So make sure you leave your whip or your conductor long enough just in case you have to move it over, because you don't know how large the garbage disposal is going to be, and it could block it. So that's an issue that I have almost once a week, if not twice. Okay, so an island. The code, the 2014, because that's the code cycle the authority having jurisdiction in my area is still on 2014. You must have at least one receptacle on a kitchen island or a peninsula. It's required now. Now, I do understand the 2023 code does have some significant changes, but please carefully read that because there is a caveat to that. So it's required in the 23 as well, but just read that for the caveat. Here's the problem with the kitchen islands and the peninsulas. Most homeowners do not want a outlet on their custom-made island or peninsula. Sometimes a pop-up receptacle would be allowed if it's a listed pop-up receptacle for kitchens. And that's something else you need to make sure you understand if you order a pop-up receptacle for your kitchen. You have pop-up receptacles used in office spaces and in different areas. So it has to, you must make sure that it's listed for the kitchen application. Because if you think about it, with the kitchen, the heat, the grease, the water, you have a lot of different elements in the kitchen that require special attention. So make sure you don't get a pop-up receptacle that's listed for office spaces. And another thing about these pop-up receptacles that I'm not there yet. Okay. So another thing about these pop-up receptacles that I've noticed on these job sites, they come with a slash rating of 15/20. Those are not allowed. The kitchen requires a minimum 20 amp branch circuit. The 15 amp outlets are commonly used in the residential areas. 15 amp receptacles are suitable for appliances that consume up to 18 watts. An example of this would be lamps, chargers, fans, TVs, computers, and small power tools. That 20 amp receptacle that I'm telling you that is required, the receptacle works best with a heavy duty cable. 20 amp outlet can power appliances rated up to 24 watts. The example of these appliances would be kitchen appliances, a refrigerator, an oven, toaster, blender, espresso, coffee machine, just to name a few. So if you have a gas range, this is an issue that I catch a lot. If you have a gas stove or gas range, don't forget your 120 volt igniter receptacle. Remember, you still need that receptacle even though it's gas. I have this issue that I'm going to mention next in apartment complexes or condominiums where you share a wall, and that's that hollow space sometimes in the columns or in the chase walls or demising walls. You have to have your fire protection, the putty pads for the adjoining walls. Remember, I mentioned this in an article I mentioned this in an episode. Demising walls, if you have a shared wall space, 24 inches or less, and it's a shared wall space, you have to use fire-rated boxes or what we call fire protection, the putty pads. Those are allowed as well. So don't forget those. nail plates. Those are required if you have shallow studs. Article 300.4. And bushings. Some of the homes that I do inspections on put up stud walls. Metal stud walls. If you do that, and you know you have a metal stud wall and you need to run your cable through, if you're going to use Romex or an NM cable, you need to use bushings. If you use MC, you can use the MC in the metal stud, but if you're in a residential, most likely you're going to use Romex. So don't forget the bushings. Issue for other areas, but we're talking about the kitchen tonight. I want to remind you, with Romex cable or MC cable, you are not allowed to use any type of foam or any type of anything that can cause damage or destructive, corrosive conditions to the cable, the aluminum raceway, or the cable sheathing. You're not allowed to use that because it eats through. There's a policy. We do have a policy out on using foam on raceways. A solution for that would be, if you know you need to install it in a wall and you need to use foam to, because why they use the foam is because they may have hammer drill out a portion of that wall and as a chase to put that cable inside, and they don't have a way to support it. So they'll use the foam or they'll use concrete or cement. So you can't use either of them. A solution would be using EMT as a sleeve for your conductors. That's a solution. Or steel MC. You can use steel because steel doesn't corrode. That article, you can find the MC 330.12.2, the Romex 334.12A, 10, and B1. Use is not permitted. I want to go over the area that I work in are older homes, very affluent area, but they have what we refer to as knob and tube wiring. Knob and tube wiring, it was a wiring method. It was used in North America from the 1880 to the 1940s. The knob and tube permits the use of an inline splice. So they were allowed to splice in the wall. Now, this was then, and this wiring method is obsolete, but when you're remodeling, sometimes you can run across it. If you open up a wall that hasn't been opened up in years, you don't know what's inside that wall. And the thing about the knob and tube, if you have to break that circuit, there's no known wiring, there's no known splicing method. So, like, you can't use a wire nut. You can't connect it to. I've been asked, can you tape it with the fish tape and the plastic tape, the rubber tape? No, that's not allowed. The splices, they can be soldered unless approved, but there's no approved method. What the authority having jurisdiction does allow, because we understand that when you open the wall, you have knob and tube, you have to intercept that circuit. We know that it has to go somewhere if it can't land on a device in the kitchen. So what you're able to do with the knob and tube, you can put it on a receptacle or a switch, COLR, COALR devices, stands for copper aluminum, a marking on electrical devices that indicate that they are compatible with both aluminum and copper. So those devices are allowed to be used in those cases. Now, it's a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, on those type of jobs, when I get there, please point out where that knob and tube is and where we have an issue, and we can discuss it and figure out a solution before the final. Now, I would like to I wanted to go over this special type of receptacle that I'm now seeing in these homes because of the look that it gives. It's a clean-cut receptacle. The name brand is Bocce. It's called a Bocce, BOCCI. My recommendation for these, I've ran across a few, and I come to the conclusion that it just depends on the manufacturer, and this is that Bocce, and they do make other types, so make sure you understand. With these receptacles, the wiring inside are not accessible, but the electrician, they must read the manufacturer's instructions because there is a special tool that comes with that receptacle where you must plug it in and remove the receptacle. But as I mentioned, please keep in mind, if you use these type of receptacles on the finish at that final, I will ask you to demonstrate, remove that receptacle so that I can see that I can get the wiring is accessible. That includes the ground tail in that box. So keep that in mind because these receptacles are now being used and they are for appearances. Please read the manufacturer's instructions. Make sure you know how to remove the receptacle on the final inspection. That's required before you can pass the inspection. Also, in the kitchen remodels, when you're remodeling the walls and you run across some things that are abandoned, that doesn't need to be used, you must remove it. So if you have any abandoned cables, any abandoned switches or J boxes, junction boxes, receptacles, anything, any old temperature control cable or telephone cable, you must remove it from the wall. Just remove it from the wall or the ceiling. So I'm going to get into the ceilings a little bit. The can lights for the ceiling, if I come on an inspection, the can light frames must be installed and the junction boxes must be installed before you will get a ceiling cover. These things must be installed. I'm going to continue to mention this. Hopefully we can get a solution. There's a problem with 3-inch and below can lights. Can lights, the LED drivers and the components and the wiring conductors inside the can lights are not accessible depending on the manufacturer. Make sure before you install 150 lights that you can get that driver out. Please call us out there before you do that. That's a job right now that there's a severe problem with this. Please make sure you can get to the components. So the problem being, as I stated, to replace the serviceable parts and the components, some amounts of the disassembly of the exterior of the house must occur to gain access. So I basically sum that up. So that's something that is really something to pay attention to. Make sure when you get the can lights, you can also send the cut sheet, the model number, to the authority having jurisdiction. We'll take a look at it. Now, we actually don't have a very good clue of how that fixture is constructed until we get on the job site. It will be proceed at your own risk. Under cabinet lighting, low voltage cables, the splices. So under cabinet lighting, Article 411, Class 2 power supply. You must have a two power supply, Class 2 cable. The low voltage lighting must be listed as a complete assembly. Pay attention to where you locate your drivers, because they must be accessible, and read the instructions on the drivers for their locations. And with the under cabinet lights, the splices, because it's low voltage, just make sure that if you have a splice that you try to conceal it, because you don't want someone, even if it's low voltage, just try to conceal that splice. I have that often. For the countertop space, no more than 2 foot from the receptacle. The maximum space between the countertop receptacle is 4 inches. Let's skip that. So now what I want to do, I want to go over a custom kitchen that was ordered from overseas that arrived on the job site. The custom kitchen does not have any nationally recognized testing laboratory. It was not tested in any shape, way, or form. I wanted to give you some of the things that was found during this field evaluation report. And I want to give you a public service announcement on ordering custom-made appliances or furniture, anything to that sort, especially if it comes from overseas. There's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration when you're ordering things from overseas. The product description: illuminated kitchen backsplash assembly. Illuminated kitchen backsplash assembly containing switches and power supply for LED lighting and electrical receptacles for power distribution along the countertop. The volts, 120, 20 amp, phase, single phase. So that's what the description was. It's illuminated kitchen assembly. Came complete with cabinets, motorized doors, LED lights, receptacles. Evaluation discrepancies. UL 962, the 4th edition, section 24.5. A receptacle installed within 6 feet of a sink shall either be protected by it should be protected by a Class A GFCI receptacle. The corrective action to take is to protect it with a Class A GFI. UL 962, 4th edition, section 3.1, 3.2. Electrical receptacles have not been evaluated by any type of nationally recognized testing laboratory to establish the electrical rating of this device. The model number is unknown. The device is rated at 16 amps, 250 volts, and that's a receptacle. The corrective action was none. There was none to be taken because that needed to be removed out of the. It needed to be removed. I'll get to that. Electrical switches and LED lights was not listed by any nationally recognized testing laboratory. Same thing, unknown. The corrective actions would be to replace the switches with listed 15 amps and 120 volt general purpose toggle type switches. The UL 962, so 4th edition, section 3.2/3.2, 3.1/3.2. Terminal blocks and plug assembling for power distribution for the next receptacle section was not approved assembly by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. No action was required because they needed to replace that. Mechanically secured, UL 1598, 3rd edition, section 5.3.1. The luminaire enclosure shall perform the following function to reduce the risk of contact with live parts. So the power supply for the upper cabinet LED was not mechanically secured as required to prevent damage. Another issue with this custom-made kitchen countertop, it's a custom-made kitchen counters. It came with the kitchen countertops, the cabinets, motorized doors, LED lights, receptacles, the bells and the whistles. 1598 section 6.17.2.1. The low voltage wiring was not separated as required. As you heard, anytime you order anything electrical, it has to be tested by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. And you're not going to get that security and that you're not going to get that if you order things from overseas. So if you order those are not the only things, because in this incident here, they have other things that are that came from overseas that also require listings. So make sure that you know what you're looking for. That's why it's very important to allow your electrical contractor to order your electrical equipment because they know what they're looking for. It's very important. So now I want to answer some questions that I received from homeowners, electrical contractors, and business owners. I'll get started with the first question. The electrician, this is a homeowner. The electrician wanted to change out my outside meter box. The electrician said that I had to change out both the panel and the meter. How can I know if this is true or not? It seems this question states that the electrician came on the job site. The owner wanted them to change one side of the service, but the electrician stated that both sides needed to be changed. Now, not knowing the situation or the circumstances, I would assume that the electrician said that both sides needs to be changed because it wouldn't pass inspection for some reason. I'm not sure, but there was a requirement a few years ago to have a new meter. But the only way you'll know that is to call out the utility company to see if the meter that you have at your home will be allowed to remain. Other than that, the electrician does know what the National Electrical Code requirements are to pass a inspection. So if they feel that it can't pass, they're telling you that before they take on that project. Because if it doesn't pass, their permit will remain open. And it will affect you, the homeowner, if that permit remains open. And how that affects you as the homeowner is because if you go to sell your home 5 years from now and you still have an open permit, that's going to be a problem for you because now that permit must be closed out before you're allowed to vacate or anyone reoccupy your home. So my answer to that question would be he or she knew that it wouldn't pass inspection, and they was trying to head it off. Okay, I'm going to move along. I have a question from Kelly J., St. Louis, Missouri. The question states that she has a receptacle. She has 2 switches. One switch works. One switch isn't working. I went in the basement and flipped the breaker thinking it would reset. Only one is still working. What could be the problem? Well, it sounds as if this switch worked before. So that's a good sign that it does have power if it worked before. The only thing I can say without actually getting in there troubleshooting is that maybe the switch went bad. If you have the power there, maybe the switch went bad. So that would be something that you would have to call the electrician out for. Or another thing, depending on what the switch is controlling, you need to maybe check the light bulb. Just saying, check the light bulb to make sure that's good before you call the electrician out. Don't do the work on your own. Just call qualified electrician, and they'll be able to figure that out. Because if you have power sitting there before it's able to work, it could be something just as simple as changing out the switch. Have a question here from Brian and Sheila S., California. The question is, buying an investment property, should you have the electrical test done before your purchase? That would be smart if you would have an electrician or a home electrical inspector come on site and do the inspection and tell you what needs to be done. In this area, because I noticed that you guys are from California, don't know California rules, but here, if you're buying a home, you do have to have certain inspections before you can reoccupy that space, sell, reoccupy, move in, or move out. So inspections will be performed here. And it is a good idea to have someone look at it, because then you'll know what you're getting into. One of the problems that we have here in St. Louis is these federal Pacific panels, and those are insurance companies that are encouraging homeowners to get rid of those type of panels. But the National Electrical Code, it allows the federal Pacific panels to stay if they're in good working condition. We cannot make you change those out. So I would say yes, that's a great idea. Also, there's another question from Brian and Sheila. The outlet is hot when you plug in an appliance. Is it the appliance or the outlet itself? It's the outlet itself. So the question is the outlet, the receptacle in the wall is hot when you plug in an appliance. Yeah, it's the receptacle. And most likely it's probably, I don't know when your home was built, but as I mentioned, different wiring methods. So this sounds like aluminum wiring. And the aluminum wiring tends to oxidize over time, and the layers conduct electricity, and that makes it hot. So this results in a poor connection with the wiring and the devices. It makes it hot. The connections can gradually heat up. So that seems like a problem, and that's something that should be addressed immediately. It shouldn't be hot to the touch. It shouldn't be where you touch it and you can't, and your hand jumps back. That's something that you need to look into immediately. Do not plug anything else into that receptacle. If possible, turn that breaker off and contact an electrician immediately, because that sounds like aluminum wiring, and that could be a hazard, a fire hazard. Homeowner. I hired a general contractor who hired a subcontractor. Why am I responsible if the general contractor did not pull the required permits? Ooh. Okay, so this question right here is stating that the homeowner hired a general contractor who hired a subcontractor, but they did not pull any permits. You're still responsible, unfortunately, homeowner. You're responsible for your home and who you allow in your home. And you did the right thing by hiring a general contractor who hired the subcontractor. But for your part, you have to make sure that everyone has their permits and license. So what they're stating here is that the kitchen was remodeled, no permits were pulled, and when they went to sell the home, that's when it got flagged. Yes, that's understandable. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So they went to sell the home. The general contractor, he didn't hire the people with to get the right permits. Now they're going to sell their home. It's been flagged. There's ways that we know when that kitchen conductors were installed. I don't want to give it away because that's an inspector's secret, an electrician's secret. But if they're making you rip that out, and it's called abatement. It's an abatement process where you illegally installed electrical work, and you cannot prove that you hired an electrical contractor. There's no permits. They will make you rip it out because there's no permit. There hasn't been any inspection, and that's a tedious process. So remember, if you are hiring anyone to do work in your home, make sure they have the proper permits. Even if it's 10 years later, you go to sell your home, they come in there, they're going to do an inspection, they see that something looks amiss, they're going to call it out. And that's why you have to, that's why it's being abated. And that also is in the Electrical Ordinance 1102. Contractor question. Does someone need to meet you on site? Yes, it would be helpful. It's not required, but it would be helpful. And the advantage, if someone meets us on site or me on site, the advantage, if I find any issues as I'm going along and I'm pointing out the issues, if I see you making an effort to correct the issues as I go, and by the time the inspection is done and you have been following along making these corrections, guess what? You passed the inspection because you made a great effort to get that done. So that's why it's a good idea to meet the inspector there, because maybe if it's some small things, you can get them done and pass the inspection. In a commercial, this is a contractor's question, a commercial office building kitchenette, does the garbage disposal require a GFCI? No. I've had this because you have the definition of a kitchen. Just short, a kitchen must have a stove or a way of cooking. It says something about cooking preparations. Just like a bathroom, the definition of a bathroom, you have to have a basin. If you go in a room and you just have a toilet, it's not considered a bathroom. If you have a basin, it's considered a bathroom. So with this kitchenette building, if it's just a kitchenette and it doesn't have a permanent way of cooking, GFCI protection is not required for the garbage disposal. No. Here's another question from a contractor. He has a kitchen island, and the kitchen island has hollow legs. He wants to know if he's allowed to use the hollow legs as a raceway to fish the cable up through the joist from the basement to the kitchen island. And he wants to conceal it and hide it and use that as a raceway. I would say, yeah. Now, this is what I would look for if I was on this inspection. Depending on the hollow legs, if they're metal or not, because if metal conducts electricity, and depending on the raceway, I would say to put it in, because you're trying to conceal it and use the hollow legs as a raceway. But if it's metal, that's going to be a problem, because if you do have a short circuit, it's going to light up that whole island or that part of the island, the legs. So it just depends if it's wood or something that's not conductive. I wouldn't have a problem with it because you can't see it. In summary, the electrical inspections are crucial for new and existing construction projects. Before drywall can be installed, an electrical inspection will be required for walls and ceilings. The electrical inspection will ensure your new or existing electrical installation meets the minimum requirement of the National Electrical Code. That's what it's all about, just the minimum requirement to make sure that you're safe. The electrical inspector primary goal is to prevent a potential fire hazard, ultimately protecting your personal safety and your property by identifying and addressing potential issues before you have any major problems. Tune in next Wednesday, and I will give you requirements, part 2, for commercial kitchens. If you have any questions or any comments, please contact me on any of my social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, under the moniker Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector. If you would like to add anything to this discussion, please email me at asktheladyelectricalinspector@gmail.com with any questions or concerns. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.